Welcome one more day to Vital en Armonía. This is session 7 of the first part in the introductory course on soul therapy and self-discovery based on harmonic principles and the tree of life. And as I said, in this session, I will use the Sephirotic tree for vocational and psychological guidance. And first of all, I announce that from now onwards, the sessions are going to be alternative, every 2 weeks, 1 week in Spanish, the following in English, because I was going too fast, and some people told me. And on the other channel, En Harmony, which I now call En Armonía, I have already talked extensively about the tree of life. Anyway, now I'm going to give a brief summary for those of you who have no idea about this, or just a very simple view. So in the first place, let's consider that what many Kabbalists and sages from different traditions regard as the tree of life is incomplete, usually, because they speak of 10 Sephirot, having in mind the ideas of the book Sefer Yetzirah attributed to Abraham. Some speak of 9 spheres, as in Scandinavian Kabalah, and this is because they usually don't take into account the full unveiling of the original intelligence of life, also called Universal Messiah, which basically means the cosmic brain functioning in harmonia. And this intelligence spoke through a man 2000 years ago, fully. He was actually called Yahushua, or Ishu, salvation by the divine verb of life, loving life, even though his teachings were not understood in general. But he showed the full access to the missing spheres of the tree of life, so we can thrive as trees of life. I am the true vine, the true original DNA of life, and you are the branches, the extensions, the so-called collective body of the Messiah. That's what he taught. And it is true that in some Kabbalistic traditions, like that contained in the Zohar, the Book of Splendor, and in the teachings of Isaac Luria, we hear about additional aspects connected to the tree of life. And what would be Ain, the hidden essence no one can define, because it's also Ain Sof, its endless nature. And then we have Ain Sof Aur, the light of the limitless one. This light is the Shekhinah, the dwelling of the Holy One, but these are usually regarded as unreachable, unknowable, and this is the problem. They consider the 10 spheres as the channels of that which is infinite and cannot be reached. However, when we open ourselves to the intelligence of true life, we realize the Holy One is dwelling amidst ourselves, and we have access to the 3 active missing spheres that somehow harmonize the 10 remaining spheres, which Ishu, in one of his parables, called the 10 coins of the woman. In other words, the Shekhinah, the dwelling of the Holy One, and she is a light, an infinite light, the manifestation of the potential contained in the Holy One. So first, we must realize that all begins with our real self, Ena in Aramaic, Ani in Hebrew, and this is complete unity. That real self is an emanation or donation of the Holy Being. So I usually represent it in the middle of the Sephirotic tree, between Da'at and Tiferet, and this gives 7 central spheres, as you'll see in a while. Actually, when we rotate the tree horizontally, the 7 central spheres can match the 7 candles of the menorah when we put the left column down below. And it was quite a surprise to me to come across this by doing diagrams. Now, our Ena, or I amness, contains a second aspect, the purpose, which is to donate one's life and light helping others. The will to give, known also as Ratzon Alehaspia in Hebrew, and some represent it as a point in the middle of Keter, However, I place it above Keter because the purpose is a sphere in itself. And this donation obviously is not possible without that third sphere, which is Keter, the crown of life, the capacity for self-government and distribution of gifts. And then we have, on both sides, wisdom, Chokmah, and understanding, Binah, which find their harmonia in another central sphere, which we can call Da'at Elyon, elevated knowing or conscience, which is not mere Da'at knowledge, which is usually regarded by many Kabbalists as surrounding energy consciousness. And this is not the case with conscience, which is more an integral insight and a sphere in itself that is more than wisdom and understanding. Kabbalists say that is the union of wisdom and understanding, but in conscience we have immediate access to the purpose, to the crown of life, and self-recognition in the next central sphere, which is Tiferet, the beauty of our being. And this self-recognition of beauty harmonizes the sphere of Chesed, mercy, on the right, and Geburah, force, strength. Also, discernment, Din, which is the left column, more restrictive. And all this leads to Yesod, the fertile ground that harmonizes the emotional sphere in Netzach, which means victory or success over passions. And then on the left, the sphere of Od, the mental consciousness and honesty, to see and show ourselves as we really are. Thus we become stable in Malkut, the fundamental ground of reality, where we are integrated in life, digesting lights and shadows, and going beyond them. However, this tree of life is not fully expressed in the human personality due to several blockages. Only the original soul contains 13 aspects and 22 illumined paths. And that's our best version, the perfect image generated by the contact of the infinite light with human personality, as we have been seeing in previous episodes. Now, normally the 22 paths that communicate the dynamics between the 10 receptive spheres are usually obstructed, and this is why we get stuck in life. We don't know what to do, where we are heading to, what's our mission, what's the meaning of life. And what happens is that the human personality is born by means of certain influences, some of which take place while the fetus is forming in the womb of the mother. And in my research for more than 20 years, I discovered that there are at least 7 block paths, and 4 of them come from birth, whereas others are reflected in the limiting names we are given in combination with other traits. But this makes possible to identify the type of vital mission that we have. So now I will start by summarizing 9 paths, because I don't want to make this video too long. And obviously there are many traumas and other aspects associated with each path, and this would require a more detailed study, but I already do that in the more advanced course online. So for now, let's remember that we all walk through the 22 paths, but we go through some of them more than through others, depending on our personality traits. So to begin with, we all bring the path 22, which is also the path 0, the path 1 and the path 2 in a shadow mode. Therefore, we have to illuminate this with the tree of life. The path 0 or path 22 goes from Keter to Chokmah and from Chokmah to Keter, from the crown of life to wisdom and vice versa. And in its positive manifestation, I call it the path of the original child, because it basically consists on opening ourselves with intuitive wisdom to the purpose and fullness of the infinite being, to express unity and loving will, which are also our own. Let's say that with wisdom we trust in the endless light, knowing what to do at all times, which is basically the essence of prudence, a virtue. And this helps us wear the crown of life, the purpose, and self government, with capacity to overcome all adversities in life. As the Master said, if you do not become like little children, you will not enter the kingdom of God, as it is translated. In Hebrew, it would be the Malkut Haeloi, or the Tiferet in the world of Atzilut, emanation. However, every path has a shadow manifestation, and in this case, we would have the path of the so called madwan or madman, the idiot, and the fool, as it was also known since the Middle Ages, or even since ancient times. And let's say that a group of Kabbalists were able to collect the 22 psychological archetypes associated with the 22 paths and many other cosmological aspects, and they summarized them in images, which became later on the 22 main tarot cards, which many mistake for Egyptian wisdom. And this is not completely the case because it's universal wisdom present in many traditions. And it came to surface in the Renaissance. However, it must be acknowledged that the idiot or the fool is an archetype associated with Casil, Orion, Osiris. Casil in Hebrew means Orion. And usually, Orion the hunter goes accompanied by a dog. And coincidentally, the original card of the fool or the madman has a dog that bites his butt. Not a happy dog, as some represent in modern tarot cards. This indicates the bite of passions, the bite of pride experienced by the first Adamic humanity that incarnated before time to be ruling messiahs, getting stuck on the time dimensions of the earth. Therefore, in its negative manifestation, this path implies carrying a satanic crown characterized by following one's own path, one's own way. Even the absence of principles, total anarchy. On the other hand, it also leads to a lack of faith, a lack of intuition, a lack of trust in the wisdom of life. It brings rigidity, dogmatism, trying to control everything. And from this, many traumas derive brain problems, even dementia, insanity because of undigested geniality. All that is associated with the right hemisphere of the brain, connected to Chokmah, wisdom. Now then we have the path 1, which goes from Keter to Binah, and vice versa. And as it is from the left column, it is more active. Actually, the archetype here is the magician, the one who manifests a hidden wealth, acting upon reality based on mental principles. And here the task is to take care of the mentations and thoughts, as these influence reality. We all bring a purpose and original image to manifest, but very often this does not manifest because there is interference from the mind and also a lack of good initiative. Let's say the world is full of psychological poison, religious, political, and socio-cultural witchcraft that interfere a lot with our true mission. And very often that witchcraft is done unintentionally because the principles of the mind and language are not usually known nor understood. And when Keter, the crown, is blocked, then we have compulsion, aggressiveness, impatience, hyperactivity, laziness, dispersion, because there is no energy available to accomplish our tasks. And the shadow understanding, Binah, manifests as pessimism, manipulation, lack of decision, lack of creativity, and this is associated with problems in the left hemisphere of the brain. Here the work has to do with a fertile creative manifestation, understanding the principles of the world, but also being very artistic, very creative, like the magician. Now in the path 2, we have a movement that goes from Keter to Tiferet, and vice versa. And it is a central channel, so this is connected to conscience, crossing Da'at Elyon, and I call it cooperative self-conscience and deep intuition, but traditionally it was known as the Popes or High Priestess, which rather indicates its shadow aspect, because in this path the main function is to tear off the veil of dark knowledge or Da'at, which hides reality. It's a path to transcend all duality conflict in all scopes: religion, politics, fallen science, the culture in general. Feeling reality without resistance, remembering from Tiferet, the harmonia, the beauty, the sense of proportion where we recognize ourselves as emanations of the infinite Holy One. And we must reveal what is hidden in us to reconcile the poles of duality, spirit and matter, intuition and action, that's represented by the two columns in the image. This implies keeping the mirror of conscience clean, with wisdom and understanding, erasing negative memories and old patterns of action and interpretation. Otherwise, this path is experienced as a fractal abyss, going down the rabbit hole due to a lack of intuition, religious fanaticism, moralistic papism, all of which leads to a lack of faith, victimism, self-criticism for not recognizing ourselves in Tiferet, the proportion of our true beauty. And this is how many end up in misery, regarding themselves as inferior sinners. And all this makes people become judgmental with the world, to depend on rigid structures. Therefore, we can say that path 2 is of divine self-recognition and cooperation, because once we find ourselves, we want to donate our true love and share it with others. So this path is very supportive to other paths as a reminder of what we have to do. Now, the path 3 is known as the Empress, but I call it the generatrix conscience because it's a movement that goes from Chokmah to Binah, from intuitive wisdom to creative understanding. And as it is a transversal path, it generates a tremendous energy, which can be very stressful when it is not properly addressed. It has to do with the union of male and female, father and mother. It can generate maximum fertility and productivity on many areas, the artistic, social, spiritual area. And those of us who have this path block very often have a lot of mental energy and sensitivity, but we need a logical structure to give it an outlet so that energy flows coherently. And that implies establishing links, connections. That is why this is a path to generate community, family, to start projects that help people to connect with others and with their own being. But we must trust our inner gifts and share them without fear. That is the step from wisdom to understanding. Otherwise, there is a lot of stagnation, and this hurts. It pulls the person down into depression. It makes one explode with an excess of hyperactivity, nervousness. And the obscure sphere of wisdom, Chokmah, is very mental, abstract, controlling, too demanding with others, inflexible, hypocritical. We might find here the tendency to read many books or do many courses without applying what is learned. And the shadow of Binah, understanding, is the opposite of fertility, the opposite of productivity, due to an excess of logic, pessimism, hyper-rationality, calculated decisions. Therefore, the essential key here is to work the coherence of the heart with reason and vice versa, establishing creative relationships. And the people that fit here more often are artists, actors, writers, good communicators in general. Now, the path 4 goes from Chokmah to Tiferet, and vice versa. It's like the relation of father-son, son-father. And this is a receptive path because it's on the right side. It's a path of leaders that make themselves from childhood with authority, with security, discipline, conquering their own throne, being emperors of their life. They can thrive despite not receiving support because they have a very structured, methodical, and intuitive mind. And in an enlightened Tiferet, the person recognizes the own worthiness with self determination to do what must be done. Otherwise, the walker on this path gets stuck with mental rigidity for self protection mainly. It's very dogmatic, stubborn, with low self esteem, spiteful. He or she can fall into obsession, perfectionism to self protect, or to be recognized by others. But it can also be the opposite, falling into self abandonment and tidiness. There can be conflict with authority, especially with the father. Now, the people that walk this path in a very enlightened way reach stability because they are very good merchants, businessmen, great entrepreneurs. As for the path 5, I call it the mediator child, better known as the Hierophant, the one who shows the divine or sacred aspect of life. Sacred is hieros in Greek. Others call him the high priest and the pope because he is like a pontiff who establishes bridges for others. But for me, the priest or the high priest is the negative side of this archetype, as in the case of the popes. And the path here goes from Chesed to Chokmah, from mercy to wisdom, and it is the highest receptive path because it requires listening to the inner voice, opening to inner gifts with full confidence, joy, humor. Keep in mind the gifts manifest from a sense of youthful soul, communicating through the spontaneous imagination of the inner child, full of enthusiasm. In Chesed, we have the inclination of service to others with mercy, happiness, vocation, and the Hierophant child often brings his original way of understanding life and the divine in general, helping others to find their way to themselves. So this path also involves the development of a deep ethical view, recognizing the most important values such as honesty, friendship, kindness, etc. But in its shadow, the path leads to dogmatism, hypocrisy, fanaticism, also a lack of joy, a lack of motivation, and this generates an internal emptiness that can lead to laziness, irresponsibility, excesses, addictions such as alcoholism, drug addiction, sex addiction. This is an emotional roller coaster of ups and downs known as cyclothymia. And the personality here also falls into idealism, the Peter Pan syndrome, the kid that is afraid of his own shadow and makes up a fantasy world to play in it. So he's also in danger of being manipulated by false teachers or his own imagination ideas. Then we have the path 6, also called the lover, and it goes from Binah to Tiferet and from Tiferet to Binah, from mother to son and vice versa, or from lover to beloved and from beloved to lover. It has to do with finding balance in love, overcoming the emotional eros full of attachments. The archetype of the mother also has to do with understanding nutrition, even from a spiritual point of view. What fills us up, really? As the Master said, no man shall live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of Elohim. We need spiritual food, obviously, but for that we require a clear consciousness to absorb it and a pure heart. And the problem in this path is that we may also find the case of a castrating, pessimistic mother who transmits a very negative view of the world to the kid, which acquires a very negative consciousness, very negative perception of reality. So the person here can grow with fear and pessimism. And many of those who walk this path very often experience abuse or bullying during childhood. Although this gives them the opportunity to overcome victimism and self-criticism, recognizing themselves in the beauty of their own deep harmonia, loving unconditionally, becoming also more independent from their mother, their friends, circumstances. The lover must also understand the principle of affinity, like attracts the like. So the lover must distinguish between the instinctive love based on electrochemical and magnetic polarity, which lasts as long as the substances last, then emotional love, which is based on dependency and expectations, leading to jealousy and hatred, and finally conscious love, which seeks to serve the evolution of the other. Therefore, in this path, we also find the subject of soulmates, twin souls, etc., which are terms used for different types of relationships. However, very few have what we could call a spiritual twin soul because very few have developed the soul to that level. In most cases, there is complementarity on a physical, emotional, and mental level, and usually people don't find complementary opposites because they are not prepared themselves, they are too demanding and selfish. And when there is complementarity on physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual level, then we can speak of a binary unit we might call a spiritual twin soul. Some now speak of twin flames, referring to a soul in two bodies, which is a valid expression, but this applies to a minority of people. Very few are this expression of the soul. Now, on the lover's path, there can be an extreme manipulation, negativism, sadness, infertility, because the area of the mother can be blocked, and therefore also intense longing due to a shadow of understanding, but also a lack of self-esteem, victimism, self-punishment, which are characteristics of the shadow in the earth. As for path 7, I call it the driver organizer, traditionally known as the chariot. It goes from Geburah to Binah, and it belongs to the adult and responsible leader who overcomes difficult challenges and trials. In an enlightened way, he or she understands well the principles of time, the cycles, to act at the right time and moment, the principle of balance and order. They are very good organizers. People on this path can walk without forcing the situation too much. This is why the driver of the chariot holds no reins. The character here leads with determination and commitment towards goals seen in Binah understanding. In this path, the person can also play many roles, is very versatile, something symbolized by the faces on the shoulders of the chariot's driver. However, in the shadow of this path, the character can be too calculating, cold, very despotic, mishandling power in Geburah. It doesn't measure strength well and overreacts. It becomes obsessed with work and time, and even with money, because the person becomes very restrictive, cheapskate, lacking generosity, confused about how to distribute money or energy in general. There can also be a bipolar behavior. The person shifts from one personality to another, something which is the shadow aspect of the capacity to play many roles. And if the person does not achieve objectives, she feels in despair trying to manipulate and control others as a result of a darkened understanding in Binah. And the dark force in Geburah manifests as aggressiveness and cowardice. So the people that fit here very well are orchestra conductors, musical band leaders, event organizers, coordinators, coaches. Now in the path 8, the traveler crosses between Chesed and Geburah, so it is transversal and it generates a lot of energy and tension between the opposite poles. Chesed is mercy and expansion, while Geburah is strength and constriction. And this is why it's called justice. There must be a balance between two opposites. And it belongs to the spiritual warrior, having a quality of defense. So people whose personality is mostly based on the energy of path 8 very often want to defend others and fight against the injustices of the world, but only when they act from the mercy and happiness of Hesed can they develop true compassion with strength, Geburah, which makes impeccability possible, always provided there is discernment, Din, which is another quality of Geburah, and that helps to restrict certain emotions and negative thoughts. It is fine wanting to help and give support to others, but a structure of life is required, not the blind justice and morality or escapisms of the old politics, religion, and culture in general. Let's say that an excess of indulgence and mercy is as destructive as an excess of severity, censorship, and prohibition, which is what most political, religious, and spiritual leaders have practiced for ages. In certain religions, for instance, there is a lot of false piety, but also a lot of self indulgence and judgment of what they don't understand. For a pastor or priest, studying the tree of life can be synonymous of occult witchcraft, and they try to protect themselves through ignorance, telling others not to study that. Also, getting into power struggles. However, as the Messiah said, I am the true vine, and you are the branches. I am the tree of life, you are the branches. In the same way, a lack of discernment leads many to an apparent non judgmental attitude, which becomes judgmental in the end, and also avoidance of certain issues, being misaligned with the true force and the true understanding of life. So, in the end, the energy explodes and generates more tension and balance. That is why religion speaks of mercy, but deep down it is based on hatred and sectarism. Politics speak of respect and democracy, but they are based on manipulation and power struggles, where only the opponent is attacked and where the population must be held under control, at least in the main tendencies that we see in society. So, due to all this path is usually walked by people who enter into disputes for property, territories, even the custody of their children. So, here we find people like judges, bankers, politicians, religious leaders, but also couples. This is something I see very much in counseling. Now, the path 9 goes from Tiferet to Hesed and vice versa. It is known as the hermit because his characteristic is introspection and careful learning through experience and prudence, the main virtue associated with this path. And when it is harmonized, the person walking on it tends to be very kind and becomes the wise counselor who guides others, helping them to recognize their own beauty. So we see the movement between Hesed mercy and Tiferet, the beauty of self-recognition. The hermit is the one who comes out of his cave, out of the cave of the world actually, after having long experience and digestion and a soul gestation process. Actually, this path reminds very much of the 9 months the fetus spends in the mother's womb. However, when there is shadow in Tiferet, there is no recognition of the inner beauty, the person does not find the own gifts, hides like a crab under the sand, looking for the own interests. This can make the person too self-sufficient, too isolated from others, or even gripped by panic towards the own light. And when Hesed is obstructed, the person becomes too cruel, selfish, because there is no mercy. That is why the hermit very often needs space and aloneness to readjust, to find himself, overcoming loneliness. And in this process, the hermit can get lost and experience very opposing situations, the three dialectical stages: affirmation, denial of everything with skepticism, to finally overcome all this in a new self discovery. And this is why many spiritual seekers and healers fit perfectly into this path. Having gone through lots of experiences, they decide to go into the world and guide others. Now, to wrap this up, remember that we always walk all the paths, but some are more blocked for reasons of birth and inheritance, and we also walk more on several paths due to our mission. Yet, only our original soul has 22 paths enlightened and the 13 aspects fully unfolded, waiting as our best version to be manifested. Now, apart from the three initial paths, there is a main path we cross, and we know it by summing up all the digits of the birth date. The first amount number that we get marks the age of transformation, which is obtained by reducing the first quantity in case it is higher than 21. So if you get 35, your transformation age is 35, and you will always find challenges in the path 8, because 3 plus 5 is 8. And if you are not adjusted to it from the age of 35 onwards, you might have troubles experiencing health issues, economic stagnation, and so on. And if you get the number 13, you travel the path 13, but have as complementary the path 4. 1 plus 3 is 4. Although then, there are more block paths, obviously, marked by the name and other influences. And the following day, I'll keep exploring the rest of the paths in 2 weeks. And for now, thank you very much for listening with attention. Tell me what you think about all this. When I have this written, I will publish it in the blog, themusicofwisdom.blogspot.com. Down below you have the link. And if this video was inspiring to you, please give thumbs up, subscribe if you want to receive weekly notifications, make comments and questions if you wish, and let's keep opening the heart to manifest the supraconditional love and modified life, integral conscience and deep, blissful serenity in the tree of life.